The galactic summit station floated silently above a distant star, a colossal structure of metal and light, designed to host delegates from hundreds of species across countless star systems. Inside, hallways twisted like a labyrinth, lined with shimmering panels that displayed the insignias of each civilization. It was supposed to be a place of diplomacy, but tension lingered in the air like a storm waiting to break. Humanity, still new to the wider galaxy, was represented by a small delegation from Earth, their presence met with polite curiosity and quiet skepticism. Among them walked Ethan Cole, a human soldier chosen to act as both guard and representative. He was tall and well-built, his movements precise, almost mechanical in their grace. His armor was simple compared to the elaborate designs of alien combat suits surrounding him, smooth silver plates, lightweight but sturdy, designed more for function than display. On most worlds, such a suit would be overlooked, perhaps even laughed at. Here, however, in the presence of the alien princess, it would provoke more than a few smirks. Lyra of the Solari Empire was famous across several systems for her confidence and sharp tongue. She had grown up among advisors who whispered that humans were weak, that their reliance on simple tools and brute determination could never match the elegance of Solari engineering. When she first laid eyes on Ethan, her expression twisted into amusement. She could not hide the laugh that slipped past her lips, a sound that echoed down the hallway and drew the attention of other delegates. "Is that supposed to be a protective suit?" she said, her voice musical but dripping with condescension. The laughter of her attendants followed, a low chorus that filled the corridor. Ethan said nothing, his face impassive, his eyes steady. There was no embarrassment, no angry retort, only quiet observation. The crowd around them murmured in agreement. Alien delegates whispered among themselves, comparing the sleek, almost ceremonial designs of their own forces with the blunt practicality of Ethan's armor. Humanity had always been underestimated, and here it was on full display. Yet among the murmurs, a few observers noted his calm. His stillness carried a weight that demanded attention. There was discipline in every step he took, a silent confidence that spoke louder than words. Lyra, undeterred by the quiet, continued her subtle barbs. She circled him as though inspecting a curious artifact. "Do humans even understand the art of combat?" she asked lightly, a question intended to mock. Ethan answered simply, "We focus on survival and effectiveness." His voice was calm, carrying no fear, no anger, only truth. The princess tilted her head, curiosity creeping into her amusement. Most had expected him to bristle, to defend, or to retreat. Yet he responded with brevity, control, and precision. It unsettled her more than any display of brute strength could. The silence that followed his words was heavy, filled with a quiet tension that no one could ignore. Suddenly, an alarm rang through the station, red lights flashing and casting long shadows across the polished floors. A security alert. The automated voice repeated the warning in multiple languages, each tone urgent, each syllable ringing with panic. Something was wrong in the northern sector. A small, dangerous attack force had breached security. Civilians and delegates alike froze, unsure how to react. Alien guards hesitated, their movements uncertain, constrained by their intricate suits and protocols that had never prepared them for a real threat. Ethan did not hesitate. He assessed the situation in moments, noting the direction of the intruders, the position of nearby civilians, and the weaknesses in the station's defense. His movements were methodical, almost fluid, as if he had run this scenario countless times in simulations, and yet he had done nothing like it in reality. He took charge, stepping forward while others hesitated, his presence commanding without the need for authority. Lyra followed at a distance, her expression unreadable. She expected fear, panic, or at least visible hesitation. Instead, she saw a human who acted with clarity, who seemed to understand chaos as an opportunity rather than a threat. Her earlier laughter now felt misplaced, a faint echo of ignorance she had yet to admit. The intruders appeared in the main corridor, moving swiftly, their weapons glinting under the station's bright lights. Their intent was clear: cause disruption, perhaps injury, maybe worse. They did not expect resistance, certainly not from a human who appeared, at first glance, as unassuming as any other delegate. Ethan moved between them and the civilians, signaling the humans nearby to follow his lead. He communicated without words, gestures precise and practiced. Even the alien guards who had doubted him instinctively followed the human's commands, drawn to the certainty in his actions. It was not arrogance, it was a form of leadership that demanded trust. One attacker sneered at his armor, waving a weapon and shouting in a guttural tongue. "Primitive human," the alien barked. Others laughed, echoing Lyra's initial amusement, but Ethan's response was not verbal. He adjusted his stance, activating subtle functions of the armor that were not obvious at first glance. Shields, stabilizers, and compact defensive tools built into its frame. Each movement was efficient, conserving energy and maximizing protection, revealing a truth that the simple exterior had hidden. Lyra watched, her eyes widening slightly. She had assumed strength was shown in appearance, in ornamentation and complexity. But here strength was silent, controlled, precise. It did not boast, it performed. Her amusement faded into thoughtful silence. Ethan guided civilians through a narrow corridor, his every step calculated to avoid danger. Explosions rocked nearby sections, forcing him to make quick decisions. A structural panel gave way, blocking the path, and without hesitation, he removed a segment of his armor to squeeze through, revealing more than just human skin. Scars from previous battles ran across his arms and chest, testimony to endurance and experience far beyond his years. Every scar told a story of survival, of challenge, of resilience. Lyra's breath caught. She had laughed at the armor, yet here was the truth. The armor was not what protected humanity. The human beneath it, scarred, disciplined, unafraid, was the real strength. Through the chaos, Ethan's calm remained. He guided the civilians to a secure chamber, checking each corner, ensuring no one was left behind. Lyra followed, watching his movements, noting how even in peril, he remained strategic rather than reactive. She had underestimated humans entirely. What she had assumed to be fragility was, in fact, a combination of focus, experience, and courage. Finally, they reached safety, but the station was still in turmoil. Explosions echoed through the distant halls, alarms blared relentlessly, and yet Ethan stood firm, scanning, anticipating, calculating. The princess looked at him now without mockery, without amusement. Only curiosity, respect, and a dawning understanding filled her gaze. She had believed strength was flash, show, and ceremony. Humanity had taught her otherwise in the span of minutes. Through action, calmness, and unyielding courage, a single human soldier had changed the perception of an entire alien delegation. Ethan glanced at Lyra, offering a quiet nod. She returned it, speechless, realizing that her assumptions about humans were not just wrong, they were naive. In the coming moments, she would witness more, but this first encounter had already set a foundation. Appearances could deceive, but the core of humanity, their resilience, their courage, their unwavering focus, could never be overlooked again. As the corridors continued to shake from distant blasts, and the screams of those less fortunate echoed, one thought lingered in the minds of all who had watched. Perhaps humanity was underestimated for a reason. Perhaps their strength was meant to be revealed slowly, quietly, and only when needed most. And in that quiet revelation, Lyra felt her amusement fade entirely, replaced by a deep, silent respect. The first part of the galactic encounter had ended, but the story of humanity's true power, the strength beneath simple armor, was only beginning. The alarm sirens still echoed through the corridors of the galactic station, but the immediate panic among the delegates had begun to settle into tense anticipation. The initial attack had been a test, a small force probing the defenses of the summit. For most species, it would have been enough to create fear and hesitation. Humans, however, were not most species. Ethan Cole, his armor now partially removed and damaged, stood as a figure of quiet command, directing civilians and guards alike with methodical efficiency. Every movement was purposeful, every decision deliberate. The chaos around him seemed only to sharpen his focus. Lyra followed closely, her expression more analytical than before. She had laughed at the human when she first saw him, dismissing his armor and assuming he was insignificant. But now, after witnessing his composure and precise coordination, she felt something unfamiliar. Respect, perhaps even awe. She studied the human's every movement, noting how instinctively he anticipated threats and adjusted his strategies in real time. Unlike many alien species, whose combat styles relied heavily on flashy displays and overwhelming technology, humans adapted. They observed, learned, and acted with a kind of quiet determination that was rarely seen in the galaxy. The attack force had split into small teams, each moving along different sectors of the station. Ethan identified the patterns quickly. The attackers relied on intimidation and speed, hoping to exploit confusion among the delegates. He calculated the safest paths for civilians, the areas where resistance could be concentrated, and where the intruders' momentum could be used against them. With precise hand gestures and simple commands, he coordinated a response with the station's security forces, many of whom had initially doubted humanity's capability. "You see how they move," he said calmly to Lyra as they crouched behind a bulkhead, watching a group of attackers approach a transport pod. "They're trying to separate the civilians from the guards. If they succeed, they gain control quickly. But if we force them into choke points, we can contain their advance without direct confrontation." Lyra nodded, though she could not hide her fascination. The way he spoke, even in the midst of danger, was deliberate. No fear, no arrogance, just clarity. She had seen soldiers before, yes, but never one who seemed so composed, so in command of both himself and the chaos surrounding him. She realized she had underestimated humanity entirely. The first wave of attackers reached the transport pod, weapons raised, ready to strike. Ethan moved with calculated precision, positioning himself between the civilians and the attackers. He used his armor not as a show of strength, but as a tool, blocking paths, absorbing minor blasts, and guiding movement. One of the alien guards attempted a reckless attack, swinging an energy staff wildly, but Ethan redirected him with a simple gesture, saving both the guard and a group of civilians who were frozen with fear. Lyra found herself following his movements instinctively. She saw the way he assessed risk, balanced speed and caution, and anticipated the enemy's next moves. Each decision was deliberate, almost surgical. He wasn't just defending, he was orchestrating the situation, turning a potential massacre into a manageable engagement. A sudden explosion rocked the corridor behind them, sending sparks and debris flying. The station shuddered, and distant screams echoed through the halls. Ethan's reaction was immediate. He grabbed Lyra, pulling her into a recessed alcove as metal shards skittered across the floor. He held her close for a moment, steadying her, but his focus never wavered. His eyes scanned the corridor for threats, noting every detail: the position of the attackers, the civilians still moving forward, the structural weaknesses in the station. When the blast subsided, he released her and they moved on. Lyra noticed the scars on his exposed arms, marks of battles that had left their permanent record. Each scar told a story of survival, of struggle, of endurance. The realization hit her: humans were not weak because their technology seemed simple. Their true strength lay in their adaptability, their resilience, and their willingness to face danger directly. As they progressed, Ethan identified a group of intruders attempting to flank a cluster of delegates. He led Lyra and a handful of human guards into a narrow corridor that forced the attackers into a single line. Using the tight space to their advantage, they could neutralize the threat without exposing themselves to overwhelming firepower. The attackers, accustomed to open combat, were caught off guard by the humans' use of strategy over brute force. Ethan's leadership began to inspire others. Alien guards who had initially doubted him started to follow his instructions. Even Lyra found herself offering suggestions, guided by his calm assessment of the situation. Together, they created a human-alien coalition, simple yet effective, using the unique abilities of each species to counter the attackers. One particularly aggressive attacker sneered at Ethan's damaged armor, clearly expecting him to falter. "Pathetic human," the alien spat, stepping forward. Ethan did not react verbally. Instead, he moved with such speed and precision that the attacker barely had time to react before being disarmed and restrained. The simplicity of the human's movements, combined with clear intelligence and strategy, left the alien stunned. Lyra could no longer hide her astonishment. Every step of the way, the human had turned what seemed like weakness into strength. His armor, though plain, had been a tool, but the real power was the mind and body of the human beneath it. She realized that her earlier laughter had been premature, a judgment based solely on appearances. As they moved deeper into the station, Ethan encountered a group of civilians trapped behind a collapsed corridor section. The debris was heavy, and the attackers were closing in. Without hesitation, He coordinated a small team, including some alien guards, to lift and clear the obstruction. He demonstrated techniques that relied on leverage, timing, and cooperation rather than brute force. The civilians were guided to safety, and the team returned to confront the attackers with renewed confidence. Lyra followed closely, absorbing every detail. She asked him quietly, "Why do humans make armor so simple?" Ethan glanced at her briefly. "Because it is meant to protect, not impress. Strength is not in the appearance, but in its use and the one who wears it." The words struck her, but she did not respond immediately. She was too busy watching him continue to command the chaotic situation with calm authority. Suddenly, a blast shook the corridor, sending part of the ceiling crashing down. Ethan shielded a group of civilians, taking the full force of debris on his shoulders. He winced but did not falter. His endurance, his determination, his willingness to place himself in harm's way, these were qualities that no amount of flashy technology could replicate. Lyra's silence spoke volumes. The lesson was clear. Humans were underestimated at their peril. They reached a central hub, a wide atrium filled with alien delegates and security personnel. Here, the full scope of the attackers' plan became apparent. The intruders were attempting to capture high-ranking officials to destabilize the summit. Panic began to spread again, but Ethan's presence provided a stabilizing force. He moved to the center, his armor battered but still functional, and issued precise commands. Civilians were evacuated efficiently, security forces were deployed strategically, and the attackers found themselves confronted by an organized, adaptive, and fearless human-led defense. The alien princess, who had followed him through every corridor, now understood the truth of humanity. She had mocked him for his armor, assuming it represented weakness. She had been wrong. The armor had been a shield, yes, but the strength had always been in the human wearing it. She watched as he assessed threats, gave orders, and inspired those around him to act with courage and precision. In every movement, every decision, he demonstrated qualities that no technology alone could provide: intelligence, resilience, courage, and leadership. The first wave of intruders was repelled, but the danger was far from over. Ethan knew that the attackers would regroup and attempt another strike. His mind worked quickly, anticipating their next moves and preparing his team for the inevitable confrontation. He instructed Lyra to stay close but safe, acknowledging her presence without distraction. She noticed the trust he extended, even to someone who had once laughed at him. It was a quiet demonstration of humanity's capacity for leadership and respect. As the battle raged on in the distance, Lyra finally spoke, her voice soft and thoughtful. "I laughed at your armor, and I was wrong." Ethan gave a brief nod, continuing to direct operations without pause. "Armor is just protection," he said. "It does not define strength." The rest of the summit watched as humans, led by Ethan, held their ground against superior numbers and advanced alien technology. Each successful defense reinforced the realization that humanity's power was not in flashy gadgets or ornamental suits, but in their mind, their spirit, and their willingness to act decisively when others hesitated. By the end of the day, the first wave of attackers had been contained, civilians were safe, and the station's security systems were back online. Yet the impression left by the human soldier extended beyond the battlefield. Alien delegates whispered among themselves, reevaluating the earlier assumptions they had held about Earth. The laughter and doubt that had greeted Ethan's arrival had been replaced by cautious respect and acknowledgement of a species that was more formidable than appearances suggested. Lyra, standing beside him, studied the human quietly. She had underestimated humanity, but now she understood. Their strength lay not in the sophistication of their armor, but in the depth of their courage, intelligence, and resilience. And she knew that what she had seen today was only a glimpse of what humans were truly capable of when pushed to their limits. The second part of the encounter had ended, but the war for perception and for control of the summit was far from over. Humanity had revealed its first real measure of strength, and the galaxy would not soon forget it. The station's corridors were still filled with tension, though the immediate threat had been pushed back. Ethan Cole, battered but unbroken, stood in the central atrium, surrounded by delegates and security personnel from dozens of species. The first wave of attackers had been repelled, but intelligence indicated that a larger, more organized strike force was preparing to enter the station. There was no time for celebration, no time for relief. For humans like Ethan, the focus remained on action, on strategy, and on protecting the innocent. Lyra, the alien princess, remained close, her earlier amusement replaced by an intense focus. She had seen the humans' true strength unfold over the past hours, and it had left her both impressed and humbled. She had underestimated them, dismissed them as weak and primitive, and now she understood that strength could not be measured by appearances. Humanity's power lay in courage, resilience, and the clarity of thought under pressure, qualities she had rarely witnessed in any other species. Ethan quickly assessed the situation. The station's communications were partially disrupted, making it difficult to coordinate with distant security teams. The attackers had learned from their first failure and were likely attempting to exploit confusion and fear. Civilians were still scattered throughout multiple sections, some trapped, others unsure of where to go. The challenge was clear: protect the civilians, neutralize the attackers, and restore order, all while maintaining minimal casualties. He began issuing precise commands. Team Alpha, secure the west corridors. Team Beta, evacuate civilians to the northern safe zones. Guards, follow my lead and block any points of entry not covered by automated defenses. His voice was calm, commanding, and clear, cutting through the noise of alarms and distant explosions. Those who followed him did so instinctively. They did not question, they trusted the human's judgment. Lyra watched him move. She could see the difference between human leadership and alien command structures. Many alien species relied on hierarchy, rituals, or displays of dominance to inspire obedience. Humans, she now realized, relied on competence, clarity, and decisiveness. Their strength came from their ability to inspire trust through action, not authority. A sudden blast rocked the atrium. Debris rained from the ceiling and sparks flew across the floor. Ethan reacted instantly, shielding nearby delegates while signaling for their evacuation. His body moved with a fluidity that combined strength, precision, and instinct. Every step, every motion, seemed calculated to maximize protection while minimizing exposure. The attackers advanced in coordinated groups. This time they were better equipped, more numerous, and more aggressive. Their weapons fired in sweeping patterns, designed to pin down defenders and create panic. Yet Ethan remained composed. He analyzed the attack, identified the weak points in their formation, and devised a counter-strategy in seconds. He directed small teams to flank the intruders, using the station's architecture to their advantage. Narrow corridors limited the attackers' ability to maneuver, forcing them into predictable paths. Automated defenses, now realigned under Ethan's guidance, provided cover and support. Every action was a combination of timing, positioning, and collaboration. The attackers, confident in their numbers and advanced technology, began to falter. Lyra found herself drawn into the strategy, offering suggestions based on her observations of the station's layout and the attackers' movements. Ethan listened, nodded, and incorporated her input seamlessly. She was no longer an observer, she was a participant in humanity's display of tactical brilliance. For the first time, she recognized that humans were capable not just of survival, but of leadership on a scale that rivaled the most advanced alien civilizations. In the midst of the chaos, Ethan identified a group of civilians trapped near a collapsed transport hub. The ceiling above them had begun to crack under pressure from repeated attacks. Without hesitation, he led a small rescue team through a side passage, navigating debris and dodging enemy fire. He instructed Lyra to assist in moving the civilians safely, and together they guided the frightened group to an intact section of the station. Each human step was deliberate, minimizing risk while maximizing safety. When they returned to the atrium, the main attackers had regrouped, launching a renewed assault. Their numbers were overwhelming, but Ethan's calm remained unshaken. He adjusted the positioning of his team, using defensive formations that leveraged both alien and human strengths. Humans were agile, quick-thinking, and fearless, while the aliens brought specialized technology and unique abilities. The combination under Ethan's guidance was formidable. One attacker, larger and more heavily armored than the rest, charged directly at Ethan. The blow would have crushed an ordinary human, but Ethan met it with controlled resistance, using leverage and precise timing to redirect the attack. The corridor shook as the force collided, and the attacker was thrown off balance. Without missing a beat, Ethan neutralized him with a combination of skill and strategy, proving that strength was more than raw power. It was knowledge, patience, and execution. Lyra watched, silent but profoundly aware of the human's capabilities. She had laughed at the armor, mocked its simplicity, and assumed weakness. Now she understood that the armor had never been the measure of strength. The human inside it, scarred, determined, and fearless, was what truly mattered. The battle intensified, but under Ethan's leadership, the defenders held their ground. He coordinated flanking maneuvers, redirected alien guards, and guided civilians with unwavering calm. Every human who followed him acted with confidence, inspired by his example. The attackers, expecting chaos and disarray, were met with precision and unity instead. In a critical moment, the attackers attempted to seize Lyra herself, hoping to destabilize the defenders by targeting their most influential figure. Ethan reacted instantly, positioning himself between her and the advancing enemies. His movements were fluid, protective, and strategic. He guided her to safety while simultaneously directing counterattacks against the intruders. The final confrontation approached. The attackers, frustrated and disoriented, concentrated their forces for a last, decisive strike. Ethan assessed the situation quickly, identifying the perfect opportunity to turn the tide. He organized a coordinated counteroffensive, leveraging the unique abilities of each species present. Alien technology, previously relied upon for flashy displays, now complemented human ingenuity. Timing, positioning, and cooperation became the weapons that determined the outcome. The assault was precise and relentless. Humans moved with calculated speed, alien allies struck with controlled force, and the attackers were systematically neutralized. Chaos gave way to order, and confusion turned into defeat for the intruders. By the end of the engagement, the attackers had been repelled, their remaining forces captured or incapacitated. Civilians were safe, and the station, though battered, remained under the control of its defenders. Lyra approached Ethan, her expression one of genuine admiration. The lessons she had learned over the past hours were profound. Strength was not measured by appearances, wealth, or advanced technology. Strength was measured by courage, intelligence, resilience, and the ability to act decisively when it mattered most. Humans, she realized, embodied all of these qualities. "You led them, all of them," she said quietly, her voice steady but filled with wonder. "You didn't just defend, you inspired." Ethan gave a modest nod. "We all did it together. Strength isn't just one person or one species, it's the way we act when it matters most." The Galactic Council observed the aftermath in stunned silence. Many had doubted humanity, assuming weakness in appearance and simplicity. Those assumptions had been shattered. Humans had proven not only their physical capability, but also their strategic intelligence, their capacity for leadership, and their unwavering courage. The perception of Earth's people shifted dramatically in a matter of hours. Lyra, reflecting on her initial judgment, understood the broader truth. Humans were not flashy or ostentatious, but they were formidable. Their value lay not in what was visible at first glance, but in their resourcefulness, determination, and spirit. The laughter she had offered at the armor now felt like a distant memory, replaced by respect and recognition. As calm settled over the station, Ethan began coordinating repairs and medical support, ensuring that the aftermath was handled efficiently. He moved through the corridors, checking on civilians, encouraging exhausted guards, and assessing the remaining threats. His calm authority continued to inspire confidence. Even in the quiet moments, his presence reminded everyone that humanity's strength extended beyond combat. It was in organization, problem-solving, and empathy. Lyra accompanied him, observing quietly but absorbing every detail. She had come into this encounter expecting to mock, to witness weakness, and perhaps to assert dominance. Instead, she had witnessed humanity's true essence. She saw courage in action, intelligence in strategy, and compassion in leadership. She had learned that appearances could deceive, that strength could be understated, and that humanity's potential was immense. By nightfall, the station was secure. The attackers had been neutralized, civilians were safe, and the Galactic Council began to recognize the role humans had played in preventing disaster. Delegates from other species who had once doubted Earth's capabilities now approached with a mix of curiosity, respect, and newfound consideration. Lyra finally spoke again, her tone reflective. "I laughed at your armor," she admitted. "I thought it meant weakness. But now I see that it doesn't matter what you wear. The strength is within." Ethan smiled faintly, a quiet acknowledgement rather than boastfulness. "Strength is not in the tools we wear, but in what we do with them, and in what we do when the world depends on us." The lesson was clear. Humans were not to be underestimated. Their ingenuity, resilience, and courage had been displayed in full measure. The Galactic Council, once skeptical, would remember this day. Alien species would reconsider their assumptions. And for Lyra, the human soldier she had laughed at would forever represent the true meaning of strength: courage, adaptability, and the indomitable human spirit. As the station settled into relative calm, Ethan and Lyra stood side by side, looking out over the vast expanse of stars visible through the observation dome. It was a quiet moment, one far removed from the chaos they had faced. Yet in that silence, the impact of their actions resonated. The galaxy had witnessed the power of humanity, not in flashy armor or overwhelming technology, but in determination, intelligence, and courage. And for Lyra, the lesson was complete. She had laughed, she had doubted, she had underestimated, and now she would never do so again. Humanity's potential had been revealed, and the galaxy would take note. The story of the human soldier, the alien princess, and the events of that fateful day would echo through the corridors of galactic history. Humans had proven themselves not by intimidation or force alone, but through the quiet strength of their actions, the clarity of their mind, and the unwavering courage of their spirit. The galaxy had been reminded: underestimate humanity at your peril.